What if the biggest criminals in the world never wear handcuffs? Because the system protects them? This is the corporate veil, and it explains why CEOs never go to jail. The corporate veil explained means understanding how power hides behind shell companies. Shell companies explained, fake businesses shielding real financial crime. This isn't fiction. This is organized corporate crime operating in plain sight. Money laundering banks use isn't hidden in basements. It's built into the system. Offshore banking isn't about beaches, yes or mas. It's about disappearing accountability. This is white-collar crime on a global scale. Street corruption isn't a scandal bataille. It's a business model. CEO corruption works because the financial system was designed this way. The hidden financial system is finally exposed. Yend to say them, and you'll never see power the same way again.
What if I told you that a man who steals a car at gunpoint is more likely to go to prison than a man who steals billions with a pen? One points a weapon at a victim, the other signs documents in a boardroom. One is hunted, arrested, humiliated, and locked in a cell. The other, he often walks away quietly, richer than ever. And that single contrast reveals one of the most disturbing truths about how the world actually works. Because when a street criminal breaks the law, justice acts fast. Handcuffs, mugshots, prison time. But when a powerful executive destroys pensions, launders money, or crashes entire economies, the punishment usually looks very different. A fine paid by shareholders, a carefully worded press release, and sometimes a multi-million-dollar severance package as a reward for stepping down. That sounds insane, almost fictional, but it's real, and it happens far more often than you think. Have you ever felt that quiet anger when you pay every cent of your taxes, terrified of making a mistake, while reading headlines about billionaires paying less than their own assistants? That feeling that the rules don't apply equally, that maybe the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed? You're not paranoid. You're recognizing a pattern most people are taught to ignore. We grow up believing that justice is blind, that the law treats everyone the same. But when you look closely at financial history and political power, a darker picture emerges. One where justice quietly peeks under the blindfold, not to see what you did, but to see who you are, how much money you have, and how connected you might be. This isn't about a few greedy executives or isolated scandals. What you're about to see is something much bigger. A system where crime has been industrialized, where small mistakes by ordinary people are punished brutally, while massive crimes by powerful institutions are rebranded as administrative errors, where police are replaced by lawyers and prisons are replaced by conference rooms. And that leads to the question that should haunt every rational person watching this. How do they get away with it? How can someone oversee fraud, launder money, or knowingly destroy millions of lives and never spend a single night in jail? The answer lies in a legal mechanism so powerful, so deceptively simple, that it functions like invisible armor. A structure originally created to protect honest entrepreneurs that has since been turned into the ultimate weapon of immunity. Once you understand how it works, you'll never look at corporations, CEOs, or financial scandals the same way again. What you're about to discover may make you angry, but it will also make everything finally make sense. Because street crime harms individuals, white-collar crime reshapes entire societies, and the reason it keeps happening is hidden in plain sight. So stay with me. We're not here to complain. We're here to expose the machinery behind the illusion, to pull back the curtain and reveal how illegal profits are transformed into legitimate business, how responsibility is erased, and how power learns to protect itself. Every magic trick has a mechanism. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So how does this invisible armor really work? And how did a shield turn into a weapon? Let's pull back the curtain. Before we go any deeper, I want to pause for just a moment, because what we're uncovering here isn't just uncomfortable, it's deliberately kept out of most mainstream financial coverage. Not because it's false, but because it's inconvenient. These are the kinds of truths that don't fit neatly into headlines or quarterly reports. And if this double standard, where the powerful seem to play by an entirely different rulebook, already triggered something inside you, that reaction matters. So let me ask you something real. Have you ever felt that quiet frustration while watching the news, realizing that ordinary people are punished instantly, while corporate crimes are debated, negotiated, and eventually forgotten? If that feeling resonates, you're exactly who this conversation is for. Right now, I want you to understand something important. This channel isn't built for outrage clicks or empty slogans. It's built for people who want to understand how power, money, and history actually intersect. Without filters, without PR language, and without pretending the system is fair when it clearly isn't. And the only way this kind of content survives on this platform is if the algorithm sees that people like you consider it valuable. That's why I'm asking you to do something simple but meaningful. If this topic already has your attention, tap the like button, not as a favor, but as a signal. A signal that these stories deserve visibility, that uncomfortable truth shouldn't be buried, and that critical thinking still has a place here. And if you want to keep peeling back these layers with us, layer by layer, by mechanism, make sure you're subscribed, because this isn't a one-off story. What you're about to learn connects to decades of financial scandals, political decisions, and legal loopholes that shape your life in ways most people never see. I also want to hear from you. Not later, right now. Have you ever personally felt that the game was rigged against the little guy? Maybe at work, maybe with taxes, maybe watching a scandal disappear without consequences. Drop a comment below with what frustrates you the most. I read them, and they directly influence which mechanisms we expose next. Now, here's why this matters for what comes next. To understand how a CEO avoids prison, you first have to understand the single tool that allows him to disconnect his decisions from the damage they cause. Without this mechanism, none of the corruption you're about to see would be possible. And that's where we're going now. Now we need to go deeper. Not deeper into people, not into scandals, not into headlines, but into the machinery itself. Because if you want to understand how the game is truly rigged, you don't look at the players. You look at the rules they're hiding behind. And buried at the core of this entire system is a legal concept so quiet, so boring on paper, that most people never question it. Yet in practice, it is one of the most powerful inventions ever created. It's called corporate personhood. Here's the rule that changes everything. In the eyes of the law, a corporation is a person, not metaphorically, literally. It can own property, it can sign contracts, it can sue, it can be sued. But here's the detail that makes this concept dangerous. This person has no body to punish and no soul to hold accountable. It cannot feel fear. It cannot feel shame. It cannot go to prison. It is a ghost. And that ghost is the perfect shield. Now imagine a ventriloquist sitting on a stage. On his lap is a wooden puppet, the corporation. The audience laughs, claps, and listens to the puppet speak. But every movement, every word, every decision comes from the hand inside it. When the puppet signs a fraudulent deal, it's the ventriloquist moving the pen. When the puppet launders money, it's the ventriloquist directing the flow. The puppet never acts alone. Here's where the trick happens. When the police burst into the room, they don't grab the ventriloquist. They grab the puppet. They drag the wooden doll into court. The judge sentences the puppet. The puppet pays a fine. And while all eyes are on the stage, the man behind it calmly walks out the back door, untouched, anonymous, and rich. This illusion has a name. It's called the corporate veil, an invisible legal barrier that separates the company's crimes from the personal responsibility of the people controlling it. And unless prosecutors can prove a very narrow, very difficult set of conditions, that veil cannot be pierced. You can see the crime, you can see the damage, but you can't reach the person who caused it. To be clear, this wasn't born as an evil idea. In fact, it was once brilliant. In the early days of capitalism, starting a business was a gamble with your entire life. One failed ship, one bad season, one accident, and you could lose your home, your savings, even your freedom. Limited liability was created to encourage innovation. It said, take risks. If the business fails, your life doesn't end with it. And it worked. It built railroads. It built industries. It built the modern world. But then something changed. What was designed as a shield for honest failure was repurposed into a weapon for deliberate abuse. Financial architects realized something terrifying. If the veil protects you from bankruptcy, it can also protect you from accountability. And if you stack that protection high enough, crimes that would send a normal person to prison for life become nothing more than accounting entries, a cost of doing business. This flips crime on its head. In a traditional criminal organization, the leader hides. In a corporate one, the leader is celebrated. He's on magazine covers. He's giving keynote speeches. He's shaking hands with politicians because he knows the system is designed to stop the bullet long before it ever reaches him. This is why when banks are caught laundering billions for cartels, something that has happened and is on public record, no one goes to jail. The bank pays a fine. But who actually pays? Shareholders, customers, employees who lose their jobs when costs need to be reduced. The executives, sometimes they get bonuses for handling the crisis. Behind closed boardroom doors, this isn't chaos or villainy. It's math. Cold, rational math. If the puppet can steal $1 billion and the fine for getting caught is 100 million, then the crime isn't a failure. It's a success. The veil guarantees that the upside is personal and the downside is absorbed by something that isn't alive. This is the real moral collapse. Power without consequence. In a healthy society, authority and responsibility are inseparable. Here, they're surgically divided. You feel every mistake you make. Miss a payment, you lose your house. Break a rule, you pay the price. There is no puppet for you. You are exposed. They are armored. And understand this. The corporate veil is just the first layer. It's the basic armor. To become truly untouchable, to make money disappear even if investigators break through the first wall, they don't rely on a single puppet. They build an entire army of them. A maze so complex that even the best forensic accountants lose the trail. And that brings us to the next mechanism. A system that multiplies fake people into infinity. A structure designed not just to hide money, but to erase its origin entirely. Before we go there, I need to know something. If you're following this logic, if you can see the strings being pulled, type in the comments, "I see the strings." Because what comes next is where the illusion becomes almost impossible to unsee. The corporate veil we just exposed is only the first wall. Strong, yes, but still a wall. And walls can be breached if someone hits hard enough, long enough. The real architects of corruption understood this early. Protection was not enough. What they needed was something far more powerful than defense. They needed invisibility, a way for money, responsibility, and evidence to simply evaporate. That's where business itself mutates into something darker. That's where we enter the world of shell companies. When you hear the word company, your mind imagines activity, offices, employees, phones ringing, decisions being made, something tangible, something real. But in the offshore world, that image is a lie. A shell company produces nothing. It employs no one. It owns no machines. It doesn't innovate. It doesn't create. It exists for one reason only: to hide. Often it's nothing more than a name on a document, a P.O. box in Delaware, or a filing cabinet in a tropical law firm where the lights are always off. And here's the disturbing truth. One shell company is useless, too visible, too simple. If a CEO moves $10 million into a single offshore entity, investigators can draw a straight line. And straight lines are dangerous. So they don't draw lines. They build mazes. This is where financial crime evolves. Accountants call it layering, but a better name is the Russian nesting doll. You open one, and there's another inside. Then another, till you forget where you started. That's not a metaphor. That is the literal architecture of modern corruption. Picture this. A CEO needs to hide a bribe. He opens Company A in the Cayman Islands, but he's not listed as the owner. The owner of Company A is Company B, registered in Panama. The owner of Company B is Company C in Liechtenstein. And the owner of Company C? A trust in the Cook Islands with an anonymous beneficiary. At the center of all of this sits the CEO. Untouched, invisible, officially non-existent. Now let's step backstage and watch what happens when the system tries to fight back. A prosecutor in New York decides to pull the thread. He subpoenas Company A. That request travels to the Caymans. The response comes back months later. We'll need a local court order. 6 months gone. Eventually, the records arrive, and all they say is, owned by Company B, Panama. So the prosecutor starts again. New lawyers, new translations, new courts, new delays. 2 years later, Panama points to Liechtenstein. Another reset, another wall, another country. This isn't investigation, it's attrition. A global game of whack-a-mole where every hit creates 2 more targets. And here's the imbalance that makes this system unbeatable. Money moves at the speed of light. Justice moves at the speed of paper. With a click, billions fly across fiber optic cables from New York to Hong Kong to Zurich in seconds. But the law crawls. It relies on treaties written decades ago, stamped documents, bureaucrats, and patience. By the time justice arrives at the crime scene, the money has already disappeared into a brand new maze. This is not an accident, it's a feature. The global financial system was built to make capital frictionless, and in doing so, it accidentally created the perfect habitat for corruption to evolve. And it gets darker. Because even these shell companies don't list real decision makers. Instead, they use nominee directors. Real people, secretaries, locals, retirees, paid a few $100s to sign papers. You can find individuals in tax havens who are legally listed as the director of thousands of companies. They don't know what the companies do. They don't ask. They just sign. So when authorities finally kick down the door, they don't find a mastermind. They find confusion. A person who knows nothing. Meanwhile, the real architect is thousands of miles away, sipping champagne on a yacht, completely insulated from the fallout. This system is designed to exhaust governments. The state has a budget. Criminal networks do not. Every layer costs money to build, and every investigation costs money to chase. Complexity becomes camouflage, and it allows CEOs to look straight into a camera and say, I have no connection to that entity. And on paper, buried under 12 layers, that might technically be true. But even this fortress has one weakness. People talk, emails leak, whistleblowers exist, and the architects know that eventually, someone, somewhere, might connect the dots. So they build one final defense, not legal, not financial, psychological. They design a system where the boss never knows too much, where orders are vague, where responsibility is fragmented, where no one ever holds the smoking gun. This is where structure meets management. This is where crime becomes culture. This is the art of plausible deniability. And that's where we're going next. Before we do, I need to know, are you still with me in this maze? If you can feel how deep this rabbit hole goes, type in the comments, the maze is real. Because the final piece isn't about money or law. It's about how they train people to stay silent, without ever saying the words out loud. The maze is built. The money is hidden, but none of that matters if the man at the top can still be touched. Shell companies protect the loot. Plausible deniability protects the king. And this is where corruption stops being a legal trick and becomes a psychological weapon. Because the final defense isn't about distance or paperwork, it's about erasing intent. If the shell company is the hiding place, plausible deniability is the alibi. It's the art of making sure your fingerprints are never on the gun, even if you bought the weapon, paid for the bullets, and hired the man who pulled the trigger. Most people imagine corporate crime as a smoky backroom where the CEO says, "Gentlemen, today we break the law." That meeting never happens. It never has to. The modern executive doesn't give criminal orders. He gives pressure. He speaks in code. He builds a culture where illegal outcomes are the only outcomes that make sense, and then looks away. This is the doctrine of the implicit order. The CEO walks into the boardroom and says things like, "We need to be more creative with the numbers. We need to aggressively optimize exposure. Missing this target is not an option." He sets an impossible destination and then refuses to look at the map. He pushes the problem downward. Vice presidents, directors, regional managers. He never asks how, and most importantly, he never wants to know. That ignorance isn't accidental. It's strategic, because in a courtroom, ignorance is armor. To convict an individual, the law demands mens rea, a guilty mind. You have to prove intent. And how do you prove intent when there's no email, no memo, no order? When everything is phrased as suggestion, urgency, expectation, but never instruction. So when the scandal breaks, and it always does, the CEO performs the same ritual. He looks stunned, betrayed, heartbroken. The company is enormous, 50,000 employees, a rogue unit. I had no idea. And here's the most disturbing part. It works. The complexity we've been dissecting doesn't just hide money. It fractures responsibility. Guilt is diluted across so many layers that no single drop is strong enough to poison the man at the top. And someone always pays for that design. This is where the tragedy moves downward. Mid-level executives, the ones trapped between impossible targets and personal survival, become the corporation's sin eaters. They sign the documents, they approve the transactions. Their names end up on the forms. When law enforcement arrives, they're the ones with fingerprints. So the company settles. The manager goes to prison. The CEO announces a thorough internal review. He claims to have cleaned house. And quietly, he keeps the bonus calculated from profits that never should have existed. This system creates a one-way elevator of liability. Rewards go up. Punishment stays in the middle. It insulates decision-makers from consequences and transforms negligence into a survival strategy. If knowing the truth makes you liable, then not knowing becomes the smartest move in the room. This is how "I didn't know" becomes policy. And to guarantee that ignorance, the CEO builds a buffer zone. Lawyers, consultants, compliance teams. Information doesn't travel upward raw. It's filtered, sanitized, sterilized. Bribes become consulting fees. Laundering becomes liquidity services. Criminal risk becomes regulatory exposure. By the time reality reaches the top floor, it's been stripped of teeth. Everyone knows the code. Everyone understands what special handling means. But because it's never written in plain English, the law struggles to grab hold of the man pulling the strings. At this point, the corporate veil stops looking like a legal doctrine and starts looking like a getaway car. The modern corporation, fragmented, outsourced, layered, isn't just efficient. It's perfectly designed for organized irresponsibility. And then comes the uncomfortable realization. When you strip away the suits, the press releases, the glass towers, this structure starts to look familiar. A boss insulated from the crime. Soldiers who take the fall. A strict code of silence. It doesn't resemble a business model. It resembles a syndicate. We're taught to believe Wall Street and organized crime are opposites. But the mechanics are hauntingly similar. One enforces silence with violence. The other uses NDAs, severance packages, and golden parachutes. One hides in the shadows. The other hides in plain sight. So ask yourself this. When a man claims, "I didn't know," after benefiting from everything, is that ignorance or design? If this idea hits close to home, if you've seen this culture of calculated blindness in your workplace, in the news, or in your own life, write in the comments. Ignorance is not an excuse, because once you see this system clearly, you can't unsee it. And what comes next is the final step, the moment where legality, morality, and power collide. Bloco 06. If we stop at legal tricks and clever defenses, we miss the most disturbing truth of all. At some point, the vocabulary itself becomes a lie, because calling this corporate crime minimizes what it really is. To understand what these institutions have become, we need to confront a dangerous question. What if we've been using the wrong word this entire time? When you hear organized crime, your mind jumps instantly to shadows, back rooms, tattoos, guns on tables, men who live outside the system. But take that image and upgrade it. Replace the alley with a glass skyscraper in Manhattan. Replace the guns with armies of Ivy League lawyers. Replace the tattoos with cufflinks and tailored suits. And once the aesthetics fall away, what remains is uncomfortable. The operating model is the same. This isn't metaphor, it's structure. In a cartel, the boss never touches the drugs, he uses soldiers. In Wall Street, the CEO never touches the crime, he uses middle management. In the underworld, assets are hidden under straw men. In finance, they're hidden under nominee directors and shell companies. The function is identical, separate profit from risk. Now look at the bloodstream of both systems. Money laundering. Cartels flood the economy with dirty cash. They wash it through car washes, casinos, restaurants, mixing poison with clean water until no one can taste the difference. Banks do the same thing, only at a planetary scale. They don't move duffel bags, they move digits. Dictators, terror networks, tax evaders, sanctioned regimes. The money flows in, gets layered through derivatives, offshore accounts, and opaque transactions, and emerges clean. The cartel launders millions. The bank launders billions. One uses a cash register. The other uses an algorithm. And the damage is global. At this point, someone always objects, but cartels are violent, banks aren't. That belief is comforting and dangerously incomplete. Banks don't use bullets because they've evolved beyond them. They've industrialized violence. In the mafia, silence is enforced by omerta. Break it and you die. In corporate America, silence is enforced by NDAs. Break it and your life collapses. When a whistleblower speaks, no one pulls a trigger. Instead, the machine activates. Lawsuits, smear campaigns, career destruction, financial suffocation. A decade of legal warfare designed to send a message louder than any gunshot. This is what happens when you talk. This is lawfare, violence by paperwork, and the fear it produces is just as effective. But here's where Wall Street surpasses the cartel. This is the evolutionary leap. A drug lord must hide from the state. He's hunted by police, judges, politicians. He is an outlaw. The corporate crime lord doesn't fight the government. He captures it through lobbying, campaign donations, and the revolving door, where regulators quietly leave public office and resurface months later on corporate payrolls. The financial elite rewrote the rules. Imagine if Al Capone had written prohibition law. Imagine if cartels designed drug policy. That's not hypothetical. That's finance. Acts that were crimes a generation ago are now standard operating procedure. Enforcement agencies negotiate instead of prosecute. When banks get caught, they don't face prison, they face settlements. No admission of guilt. A fine that represents a fraction of profits. And the stock price rises the next day because uncertainty is gone. This isn't corruption on the margins. This is institutionalized racketeering with a press department. At this point, the distinction collapses. Wall Street isn't a sector that occasionally breaks the law. In its darkest form, it is organized crime that achieved something the mafia never could: legitimacy. It didn't evade the system. It hacked it. It captured the state and convinced society that extraction is innovation. One group hides in the shadows because it has to. The other operates in daylight because it owns the light switch. And that realization forces a final, uncomfortable reckoning. We admire these figures. We call them visionaries. We put them on magazine covers. We teach their leadership principles. But strip away the branding, the philanthropy, the carefully managed narratives, and ask yourself honestly, are we studying entrepreneurs or the most successful criminal organization ever assembled? Because when this system finally collapses, and history tells us it always does, there's one final question that matters. Not theoretical, not abstract. Who is left standing in the rubble? Who absorbs the losses? Who pays the real price for this transfer of wealth? It's not the corporation, it's not the executives, and that's where the story ends, with the people who were never invited to the table. If you see the parallel, if you understand that the difference between the street and the suite is just wardrobe, write in the comments, the suit is a costume. Because once you see that, the illusion is over. And now we arrive at the most uncomfortable truth of this entire investigation. Because every crime has a victim. And in this one, the victim has been watching quietly from the very beginning. Not the CEO, not the board, not the lawyers hiding behind contracts and shell companies. The victim is you. When a street crime happens, you can point to the harm immediately. But when a corporate crime is executed through spreadsheets, subsidiaries, and legal language, the damage feels invisible until the moment the bill arrives. And when the house of cards collapses, as it always does when greed outruns reality, the people who caused the collapse are already gone. The wreckage is what they leave behind for everyone else to live in. Look at every major corporate implosion in modern history. When the fraud finally detonates, the executives don't lose their homes. They don't lose their savings. In many cases, they don't even lose their jobs in a meaningful way. Thanks to contracts written by boards that protect their own, they walk away with something called a golden parachute, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars paid as a reward for failure. Think about that for a moment. In what other area of life do you get paid a fortune for destroying what you were hired to protect? But while they drift away toward private islands and advisory roles, the shockwaves begin to hit real people, employees, families, entire communities, workers who were told to be loyal, workers who were encouraged, sometimes forced, to tie their retirement savings to company stock. While executives quietly sold their shares because they knew the truth, the employees held on. And when the company collapsed, those savings went to zero. Decades of work, gone. A child's college fund, gone. A retirement that was supposed to mean peace, gone. This isn't just financial loss. This is the theft of time, the theft of life. And it doesn't stop there. Because even if you never worked for the company, even if you never owned a single share, you still pay. Through bailouts, through taxes, through inflation. When institutions labeled too big to fail gamble with the economy and lose, they don't accept the consequences. They hold the system hostage and say, if we fall, everything falls. And terrified governments respond by opening the public checkbook. Profits are private, losses are socialized. It's a casino where the players never lose. Because when their bets fail, the spectators are forced to cover the debt. This is how the corporate veil transformed. It was never meant to be a weapon. It was designed as a shield to protect honest risk-taking from honest failure. But in the hands of the modern corporate elite, that shield became a sword. A tool not to defend innovation, but to attack accountability. To cut pensions, to slash regulations, to sever the connection between action and consequence. It has become a system of mass wealth extraction. And the most dangerous cost isn't measured in money. It's psychological. When people see criminals celebrated, when they see magazine covers instead of courtrooms, something breaks. Trust erodes. Cynicism takes root. People stop believing that effort matters, that rules apply, that fairness exists. A society cannot survive when its citizens believe the law is theater. So we have to ask the question no one in power once asked. How long can this continue? How long can a system survive when a small group is legally insulated from responsibility, free to act without conscience or consequence? The corporate veil has become a shroud, covering the body of moral responsibility. It allows corporations to behave like psychopaths, perfectly rational, completely amoral. If breaking the law is cheaper than following it, they will break it. Every time. But now, something has changed. You've seen the strings. You've seen the nesting dolls. You understand that the complexity is not accidental. It's camouflage. The fog of legal language exists to blind you. And once that fog lifts, the picture is brutally clear. The corporate veil is the mechanism that allows the few to prey on the many. It is the structural flaw in modern capitalism, and if left untouched, it threatens to bring the entire building down. We are at a tipping point. These aren't isolated scandals. They aren't bad apples. They are the predictable outcome of a system designed by a bad orchard. The first step toward change is seeing the system for what it truly is. Looking past the logo, past the stock ticker, past the press release, and demanding that the veil be pierced. This was a heavy dive. And yes, it's uncomfortable to realize the scale of the game being played against you. But knowledge is the one weapon they can't buy, bury, or lobby against. You can see the matrix now. If this changed the way you look at the news, if it shifted how you understand power, if you stayed until the end because you wanted the truth, leave a mark in the comments. Write, piercing the veil. It tells me you're part of the minority willing to see the world as it really is, not as they want you to see it. What you've just watched isn't a standalone video. It's one chapter of something bigger. We're not chasing headlines here. We're building a library of financial truth piece by piece. A map of how power actually moves behind the scenes, long before it reaches the evening news. And if understanding these hidden mechanisms matters to you, staying subscribed isn't just support. It's how you make sure you don't miss the next layer when it's uncovered. If this video gave you a perspective you didn't have 20 minutes ago, that means the illusion cracked, at least a little. Hitting the like button is the simplest signal you can send to say, this kind of work matters. It tells us to keep pulling on these threads even when they lead somewhere uncomfortable. Now, I want to know who stayed alert until the very end. Not passively watching, not half listening, actually paying attention. Drop a comment below and write, eyes open. That single phrase tells me you're not just consuming content, you're questioning the system that feeds it to you. And before you go, understand this. The corporate veil is only one side of the machine. It protects the players. But something else moves the money. Something quieter, something older, something far more powerful. There's a video on your screen right now that breaks down exactly how the banking system becomes the bloodstream of this entire operation. How money flows, disappears, and reappears in ways most people never see. This isn't a suggestion. It's the next piece of the puzzle. Click it. Complete the picture. I'll see you on the other side.